I am live, but let me share this while everyone joins to the group in Gently Led Sisters. If you have not joined that and you are on Facebook, our group will come up if you search for it, Gently Led Sisters group. It is private, so you have to answer that you're a woman and all that good stuff before you join. Mainly just don't want weird troll men trying to join. And yes, that does happen. I get some weird emails sometimes from men. So mainly, if it is a joint account, we do allow those to join. You know, if it's a husband and wife's name, a lot of times it's the wife that kind of runs the Facebook account anyways. So yes, we do let them join if you are a joint account. But if it's just a man, no. Sorry. This is kind of a safe place for women to come and ask questions and all that good stuff. So, okay. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Amber. Hey, Angeli. No, not relevant, but that's okay. It's just kind of stored away in your memory. And, you know, maybe just talking about some of this stuff will give you a better appreciation for the moms going through this at that time, or just kind of a glimpse into our life. So you don't have to be going through this for this to help. Sometimes it can help you to have more compassion on young moms, or even more compassion on those raising teenagers or whatever. So yes, definitely join in, and it'll give you a glimpse into all of our lives. If not help, you have just a little more compassion, which I haven't even gotten my outline pulled up. Let me get it pulled up here. Okay. So I wanted to talk about just parenting through the different ages. And I was talking to another mom of many today, kind of just about this, about how just parenting just changes throughout the years. You know, when they're little, you're exhausted physically, but as you get older kids and older teens and then into adulthood, it gets exhausting mentally, and just all the differences that comes with parenting. So I kind of wanted to go through this. So I guess, hello, Kaylin. I guess the theme for today's show could also be called Be Careful What You Say When You Only Have Little Kids. Because if you haven't raised a kid to adulthood, you don't know what you're talking about. Plain and simple. Now, if you've raised, let's say you have a 7-year-old, 5-year-old, 3-year-old, you know what the baby stage is like. I'm sure you have plenty of advice about that. You know what the toddler stage is like. Plenty of advice about that. But anything past 7, you really have no clue until you've gone through it. So just throwing that out there. Kids have a way of throwing you for a loop, and they have a way of making you eat your words. You have to remember that you are raising someone with a heart and soul and emotion. You aren't raising a robot. You aren't raising something like a computer that's just programmed to do your bidding and only your bidding. No, you're raising someone who has a will and desires of their own. As such, it's not your job as a parent to crush their will or to meld them into little trained robots that have no will of their own. That's not our goal when raising children. Because eventually they will hit 18, and what was in their heart will be manifest for everyone to see. I now have the biggest range of kids that I've ever had. I have almost 21 down to 2. So I have basically a child in every stage of raising kids, except for newborn. I basically have a kid in every stage right now. So I feel pulled in a million directions because every stage requires something different from you as a parent. And this is one thing that I've learned. When I was first married, we just assumed cookie cutter kids, right? You do the same thing for every stage of life and they turn out and life is grand and good and whatever. That's not how it goes. It's so much different than what you imagine in your head before you get married. It's so much different. And there's no describing this except for the fact that you have to go through it yourself. And my lights are about to fall. So I'm hoping they withstand the whole show, but they might just topple over. They're on this shelf and it's leaning quite dramatically. So we'll see if it lasts through the whole thing. So, oh, thanks, Amanda. I do this on my dirty hair day because I wash my hair twice a week, and it's just a braid, bobby pinned back, but the curls are kind of like this. Yeah, so that's what I do on my dirty hair days. So anyways, don't know why Woodlawn is calling me. Let's see. Yes, every stage requires something different from you as a parent. And I'm going to go over these differences and hopefully offer some tips as we go through these. But first, I'm going to text my son and tell him that Woodlawn Arts Academy was calling me because he's taking guitar lessons there. And I think it's about the time that he's supposed to. And I'm wondering if that's why. I don't know why they were calling me though. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask here. Okay, so let's go through the stage of babies. We're going to hit babies, toddlers, tweens. Tweens is like the age from, kindergartners. Tweens are like the age from like 8 to 12, and then teenagers, and then adults. So I pretty much have a baby in every single one of those stages, with the exception of baby stage, but I've had 8 in the baby stage. So yes, I have hopefully some tips, and we're going to kind of go through like the hardest part of them, but then the easiest part of that stage. So I would think that the babies is the hardest stage physically, because you have no sleep, no rest. You're trying to get breastfeeding down. If you have a newborn, you're trying to recover from childbirth, you're trying to recover from 9 months of pregnancy and all of that. So it can definitely be hard mentally, but only because of sleep deprivation or if they're colicky. So I think it can definitely get to you mentally that way. Also, it can be hard emotionally because you have all of these postpartum things hitting. You have usually about 3 to 6 months is kind of when mine peaked. And then from about 9 months on, it got a little better. And I really only had postpartum with a few of mine. I did not, with the first 4, I never really dealt with like huge hormonal fluctuations. I did though from about, Allie, I did with really badly, but she was one of my worst labor and deliveries, and she's the one that gave me my herniated discs in my back. I did not really with Lana or even Kelly much, but Kelly a little bit, but I had it really, really badly after Hannah. So I've had a couple that were pretty bad. So it can be definitely very hard emotionally in that regards, and physically because of all the recovery that you're going through. But this is definitely the easiest stage when it comes to the mental part of raising them, because if you lay them down somewhere, they're going to stay. They're not going to get up. They obviously don't really have a will as far as defying you, sassing you, arguing with you, saying no to you, throwing temper tantrums. You don't deal with that yet. So in that regard, it's pretty easy. And they only need 3 basic things. So they need, food, warm clothing, and to have their diaper changed, and lots of love and cuddles. And they just like being near you. They like laying on you. They like sleeping next to you. So that's pretty easy. The 3 basic things when they're a newborn. And, it's the easiest when it comes to the mental part of raising them, unless you're dealing with like hormones and fluctuations and different things like that. So I would say, just a second. Now I have someone at the door. Is that you at the door, Tom? I'm live right now. Oh, just a second. It's in here somewhere. Talk about distractions. Can you lock it for me? He needed the church card that I had. So lots of distractions today. Sorry. That's the the beauty of doing it live, is that we're going to have those distractions sometimes. And when you've got all these millions of things going on, my husband needed something, I think Woodlawn's calling because of Jason. So all these different things, that's part of being pulled in a million directions right there. So, do not discipline a baby, and be wary of those who tell you to start implementing discipline. Babies are not exerting their will or their, if people tell you that, and I've heard some preachers actually say to start disciplining from the day that you bring them home from the hospital. I think that is one of the most wicked things that you can tell a new parent, and that's awful. And I would consider that child abuse. Babies only have a few basic needs. They are not trying to test you by crying because they're hungry. They're not trying to exert their dominance by wanting to be fed or wanting to be loved or wanting to be hugged. I mean, think about it. They had 9 months of basically having every single need met, and then they're brought into this cruel world. So they're going to be in shock when they're first born. They're going to be like, what is going on? They've never experienced hunger. They've never experienced fear. They've never experienced loneliness. They've never experienced cold of any kind. They were perfectly sheltered in your womb. So it's not called the 4th trimester for nothing. Cuddle that baby, love that baby. You can't love a baby too much. You can't give it enough attention. You can, however, deprive a baby from the things that it needs very much. And that is human touch, human contact. They've done horrible experiments in the past showing how babies become mentally retarded by being neglected, by being put down somewhere and never hugged and never touched and never cuddled. They actually, it impairs their brain development, because a baby's brain is developing even still after it's born for quite a few years. So 1 to 5 is a very, very important, 0 to 5 is a very, very important time for establishing the self-worth of a child and how much he is loved and how much you care for him. And so he needs all that, the cuddles and the affection and the loving. And don't ever let someone tell you that you can spoil a child by loving them too much, kissing them too much, caring for them too much. And never let someone tell you to start disciplining a baby. I would say pretty much any time between a year, if you start implementing what you would call discipline, be wary of someone who is saying that. Now is not the time when they're a baby to start demolishing their will. So you are the mom. Trust your instinct when it comes to your baby. You know best. You carried that baby. You poured all that love and attention. You know your baby the best. From the time that the baby's born, you're reading its cues. You can kind of tell what's going on in its head even before they communicate verbally. So you are the mom. Trust your instinct. So I'm always appalled when I've actually heard an old recording of a preacher. I would say from about the 70s or early 80s, where it's the one that was telling parents that they need to start disciplining the baby from the time that it comes home from the hospital. And I was just horrified. And some of that preacher's children grew up to say that he was very abusive in nature and talking about over the top discipline that he handed out. So it's always a red flag to me when someone suggests even swatting, 4-month-old, 5-month-old, 6-month-old. At that point, they are not deliberately disobeying you as the parent. So from 0 to about 1, they might cry because they're wet, or they might cry because they're hungry. They're not crying to get at you. It's just ridiculous to even suggest that. So, Sarah said, I'm following a wonderful Instagram for mindset, specifically motherhood, that has helped me mentally to know that they aren't doing any of those hard things to make my life harder. Exactly. They do these things because they know mom is safe for them. Exactly. You are their only safe place, because they're brought into this world. They didn't choose to be here. We brought them into this world. So, you are their security. You are their safe place. So Tessa Romero, I've never even heard of her. But yes, if you struggle in this area, especially becoming frustrated, just becoming exasperated with your child just because they have child needs. Definitely try following good sites like that will give you insight and let you know that, your child's not doing this to get you. Your child's not doing this to annoy you. Your child's doing this because they're a child and you are their only security. So I like that, Joyce. I don't like the victim mindset. So I like that. She said she's so inspiring, talks a lot about getting out of the victim mindset. So I have a lot of different styles when it comes to parenting my babies. I'm sort of crunchy in some areas, but I'm not in other areas. I like some of the aspects of gentle parenting, but I can't stand other parts of gentle parenting. I have co-slept out of necessity, but not so much out of conviction. Mainly because with Kelly, she was my first full-time co-sleeper. And interestingly enough, she's almost 4 and she still would prefer nothing more than to be cuddled up to me all night long. That's how she is. We're trying to get her out of coming into my bed in the middle of the night. Some nights were successful, some nights not. But I did it because she was my most colicky baby. She was my most fussy baby. She was my most needy baby. And I was not about to spend nights pacing up and down trying to get her to sleep by herself. So I brought her to bed with me out of necessity. So I could sleep, and we both slept better doing it that way. I won't discipline my baby, but if they have to cry for 5 minutes so I can wipe another child, deal with another child's fit, deal with a temper tantrum, then so be it. I'm not a big advocate of letting your child cry and cry and cry and cry for hours and hours and hours and hours until they figure it out. But if life happens and I have to deal with something that popped up, then if the baby has to be in a safe place and cry for a little bit while I deal with it, then so be it. I'm not going to feel guilty about that, because when you're a mom of many kids, sometimes it just comes down to that, especially when you've got a lot of little kids. You have to deal with one fire at a time. You cannot deal with a raging fire inferno. You have to just deal with one fire at a time. So, and that's where that'll happen. So that's true, Sarah. So she has a method of saying, I can do anything for a few hours. And that kind of helps get your mindset good to where you're not getting mad. And that's kind of my mindset. I think when I come to life, I take one day at a time, because if I start thinking of, I'm going to be in the stage forever, I'm going to be in the stage of diapers forever, I'm going to be in the stage of potty training forever, it becomes very overwhelming. So I think if we kind of change our mindset when it comes to different things, it definitely helps us cope better and helps us have a better attitude and not lash out at our kids. So yes, I think that's a good point. So let's talk about toddlers. And now, if you guys have any tips, those of you that have been through it, if you have any tips, go ahead and leave them in the chat too. This is open discussion. So I encourage the discussion. I encourage the different tips. We all learn from each other. And I really like that. Hello, Ashley. So let's talk about toddlers. I believe, being in this stage right now myself, that toddlers are exhausting physically and mentally. Training definitely begins in earnest from the time that they reach 18 months, 2 years, 3 years. I would say the most intensive training for me happens from about 2 to 5. Those 3 years is kind of where you're really establishing a lot of the training. The fits can be exhausting when it comes to toddlers. It can definitely be exhausting, especially if you have a strong-willed child. I have some, Hannah's a little feisty booger. She's my last. She has to be, as the youngest of 8. Plus, she's got siblings who like to tease her a lot, and she is very spunky and feisty because of that. But she actually is not really that strong-willed. If she starts having a fit, we can pretty much squelch it very quickly. But we've had some children where it does last a long time. And Kelly was one of them. Abby, believe it or not, was also like that when she was Kelly's age. Abby and Kelly are actually very similar in nature. So I've had a couple. Chloe was very strong-willed as well. And Tommy, but then I've had a few that were not. Jason was so easygoing. Allie really wasn't that strong-willed. Lana was not really that strong-willed. So I've had a few that really were, and then I failed a few that weren't. And as toddlers, it can be exhausting, but toddlers make up for it in cuteness. This is when their vocabulary is exploding, when they're learning. They say, why, a million times a day. You can just see their wheels turning in their brain as they're figuring out new stuff, and they're exploring the world, and they're finding that they have their own body and their own person. And that's why they try to push things with you. Hannah's new favorite word is no. She likes to say no a lot, and she hears it a lot, and that's probably why. So we are working on that mainly at home. All of the training most of the training, you're going to have to at church, especially if you stay there all day like we do sometimes. But the majority of the training happens at home. So try to do it there. The biggest reason for fits, in my opinion, is communication. They want to communicate, but they don't understand how. A lot of times they don't have the vocabulary. I have found that the fits really tend to start decreasing once my children's vocabulary gets extensive enough so they can tell me exactly what's wrong. So most kids, when they can't get across what they're trying to get across, they cry or they throw fits. And then once they start talking, the fits dramatically reduce. At least that's what I've seen from my own kids. We want to be strong-willed kids, but remember, in every situation, every tense situation, you are the adult. So if you feel like you are going to have an outburst, you're going to do something you regret, just simply leave your child in their crib and walk away, close the door, go in your own room, calm down, pray, read the Bible, a few Bible verses, and then go back and deal with it. I think it's very, very important to really play with your kids, play with your toddlers, have fun with them, even if it's something silly like throwing a ball back and forth. Oh my goodness, kids laugh at the stupidest things, and it's super fun sometimes. Like Kelly is so advanced with her vocabulary; she'll tell me exactly what she wants. And the other day, I was in my room. I was there just with the two babies, as I call them. And I was trying to get some stuff done, which I still haven't gotten done, actually, for my piano academy at the computer. And they were kind of behind me, behind these trunks in our room. And I was like, Mommy really needs to get this done. And I never did, but oh well. But I said, I really need to get this done. And Kelly said, Mommy. And I turned around and I looked at her, and she's like, you're not talking to anyone, and you're not talking to anyone on your phone. So can you please play with me? That was so cool. How can you say no to that? So she had like this little store, her and Hannah were behind there, and they had this little store, and they wanted me to buy stuff. So I was pretending to buy stuff, and I was pretending to eat it. And I was just like, that is so good. Just stupid stuff like that. And they were dying laughing. And you should have seen the joy in her face. Oh, and this is the part I forgot too. When I was just acting impatient, like, Kelly, I really need to get this done. And she was just like, Mommy, please speak nice to me. Don't speak mean to me. And I wasn't even that mean. I was just a little impatient, but she's so sensitive to that. And she can verbalize herself so well. It kind of shocked me that, and I was like, well, Mommy's not really being mean, but okay, I'll play with you or whatever. And that's the type of thing that they're going to remember. They're going to remember Mommy laughing with them and joking with them, and they were just both dying, and it was just silly little stuff. And I didn't get it done, and it's still there waiting for me to be done. So I'll probably do it this evening, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. I can get to it later. And as moms, I don't know if you're this way, but I feel because we're pulled in a million different directions, I can't even remember why I didn't even get back to it. I ended up going feeding them or something. I don't know. So I never got around to it. So toddlers need a lot of sleep. So toddlers pretty much from the age of birth up until even teenagers need a lot of sleep. I feel like my kids that don't need as much sleep in order to control their emotions are like my 8-year-old and 12-year-old. But even them, sometimes they get emotional if they don't get. Pretty much every kid needs a lot of sleep, actually. But as toddlers, definitely try to establish a sleep pattern, and sleep begets sleep. So if you still have if you still have a toddler that takes a nap, that's a good thing. If they take a nap in the afternoon, they're going to be more likely to sleep well at night. I don't know why that is. It just is. It's why even if you lay a child down to go to sleep at 7 p.m., they wake up at the same time in the morning as they would have if you laid them down at 10 p.m. I don't know why, but that's why I go for the early bedtime, especially in winter when it gets dark very fast. So have them get a lot of sleep. They definitely need it. Their brain is still developing and still growing, and they need that sleep. And I think sleep also contributes to a lack of sleep contributes to a lot of temperamental problems. That is why for me, Mondays and Thursdays are my hardest days with the babies, because Sundays and Wednesdays, they get all messed up on their sleep cycle. So I've definitely seen that in my own kid's life. Let's talk about kindergartners. So with kindergartners, most of the fits have leveled off by then. At least for me, by the time my kids hit 5, they're not throwing full-blown fits anymore at all. Actually, by the time that most of my kids reach 4, they've pretty much learned that crying for no reason is a big no-no. Throwing fits is a big no-no by 4. But I would say by 5, most of the crying has ceased for just ridiculous stuff. I really like the kindergartner age. They're capable enough to carry on a full conversation with you. They're adorable. They start learning how to read. This is when schooling begins, and they start becoming a help. They can really help you do stuff around the house. It's the first time they start becoming a help where you're not having to micromanage every little thing that they do. So at this age, definitely let them tag along with you for chores and show them how to do it, because if you start incorporating that at this age, it's really going to help as they get older. They're just going to start automatically taking over that. So I would definitely recommend still having good sleep schedules during this age. I don't normally let my 5, 6-year-olds stay up till 9, 10. They still have a pretty good bedtime between 7 and 8 at this time. And even when they start school, they're going to need a lot of nap time. Sleep has always been super important to me. If I could choose anything as a parent, a maid to clean your house for a year, food delivered to your home every day, or a solid 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night for the next year, I would pick sleep. That's how important sleep is to me. And my mom said that even when I was in kindergarten, when I started school, I would have school from 9 to 12 during the day. And then I would get home and I would take a nap from 1 to 4. And I totally believe that about myself, because sleep is important. And when they start doing school, suddenly there's even more. Their brain just explodes. They're learning all this new stuff. So definitely, I wouldn't say give them a nap. That was just me because I like sleep. But I don't know, some kindergartners might like a nap, who knows? But they definitely start becoming a help at this age. And they are so moldable at this stage. One of the things I love about this stage is they don't really question you. Like mom and dad hung the moon, right? Mom and dad's a superhero and mom's amazing. And they love you with this just fierce, unconditional love. And most of the time I've had kids of every stage. And this is the age where my son would write me cute little notes. And he just was like, I love you, mom, all these cute little things. And as they get older, they start realizing that mom and dad have faults. And mom and dad aren't perfect. And they start seeing every little thing and they'll call it out. Kids will call it out. So I love this age because they are so attached to you and you can just do no wrong. And they're so moldable. This is the time, if a child is being raised in a Christian home, usually about 5 to 6 is the age where the gospel clicks. They really understand it, maybe from hearing it so often. If you go out soul winning or if they're in church, they hear that. And this is when it usually clicks. Most kids, if you ask them that grew up in an IFB home, in a Baptist home, in a preacher's home, it was about 5 or 6 that they really understood. Some kids, it takes longer, and that's fine. Don't think that something's wrong with your child if they haven't asked questions. We always let our children approach us about it. We don't push it on our children. We really just pray at this point, Lord, if it's time, please let them hear your word. Please let them ask questions. Please let them accept your gift of salvation when if it's time. So we really, really pray about that when it comes to this age, but we don't try to really push it, we that's kind of a sign for us in a way. Like if our child approaches us about it, we know that they've been thinking and they've been pondering it and they're open to ask questions about it and they really want to know. So but I love the kindergarten stage. Like kindergarten, first grade, second grade are some of my favorite years. Hands down, some of my favorite years, just because of that, because it's just the genuine, sweet, innocent love there that they have for their parents it's like the sweetest at this age. I don't know what it is about it, but if you haven't had a kindergartner yet, just wait. It's just a super cute age. And like I said, most of the fits have leveled off. They've learned that you're the boss. And they sit really good through church. They usually play pretty good with their peers. They don't sass you yet at this age. So then we get to the tweens. And this is where things start to change. So up until this point, this would be like parents with kids age 8 or younger. I'm just going to say you're kind of in the honeymoon stage when it comes to kids. I have a hard time taking advice about parenting from anyone that doesn't have a kid older than 10. I'm actually getting to the point in my life where I have a hard time taking parenting advice from anyone that doesn't have an adult kid, that hasn't raised a kid who wants to continue serving the Lord, loves the Lord. I'm looking for people who have the tried and true product. And so I'm to that point in my life where everyone has bits of advice that they can offer, but if you've never truly even raised an adult, then you're just blowing out words. You're just saying what you think. You're saying what you think will work. But if you haven't done it to where people can see that it works, then I don't know. I would just rather listen to someone that has raised 5 kids that are all still in church, love the Lord, serving the Lord, raised, married good spouses and carried it on. That's kind of who I want to get my advice from. So, but you get to the tween age years. Suddenly mom and dad can do wrong and they let you know about it. Kids see everything. In my experience, this is kind of when the sassiness starts. And at this, from about 10 to 12, their hormones start going crazy. So they're developing, they're growing. Even earlier in 2022 America, 2022 world, because of all the hormones and things that they put into our food, the hormones are also going into our bodies. And so because of this, girls and boys are developing much faster than in previous years. So they've got all this stuff coursing through their body. They're changing. They don't understand it. They're gearing up, girls are, to start their cycle. And it's just their hormones all over and they have a hard time controlling it. I mean, they're only 10 to 12 years old. So they haven't learned yet quite how to control their mouth and control their anger. And if they're mad, they just pop off at the mouth, so we have to teach them self-control when it comes to this. And if you aren't exhibiting self-control, if it comes to your anger, if it comes to your impatience, why would your child exhibit it? So a lot of our bad traits tend to come out in our kids. And it's a sad truth that I can see a lot of my bad qualities are picked up from my children, because that's all that, they see my bad qualities exhibited. So they're going to pick up on that. And it's just human nature too. So there's lots of patience needed for this stage for the parents. This is one I would say personally, I think that from about 10 to 15 is the hardest stage for me to deal with, controlling my impatience when it comes to my child, because they're old enough, they should not be throwing fits, obviously. They're old enough to have learned to obey without question. They're old enough to learn how to start treating other people when it comes to being nice and being friendly and not being a bully. So when I see them go against what they know is true, that's where I have a hard time not becoming very, very impatient. And this is when I think that things start to get hard mentally for parents, because they're getting to an age where they are starting to question. And it's going to mean you're going to have a lot more explaining that goes into things, a lot more explanation, explaining why, oh, this is why we do what we do. This is why we believe what we believe. They start to question. So definitely have answers for your questions. Why do you dress the way you do? Why don't you listen to some of the music you don't listen to? Why don't you go to some places that you don't go to? They're going to start questioning it. So you better have answers. And then they take everything personally. So tread lightly, some more than others, but they are starting to become self-conscious as they grow towards the teenage years. They're going to start growing very, very self-conscious about their body, which is changing, about their personality. How am I perceived by others? The teenage years are going to be the most insecure part of a child's life. They question everything. Why was I put here? Why am I here? You know, and it's your job as a parent to help steer them in the right direction. And it's also your job to influence them in these years. You know, not make them. Hopefully the goal for me is to raise children who want what we have. I want them to want marriage and kids like we do. I want them to want a home life like ours. I want them to want a church like ours. So I have to be happy in my life so that they can pick up on that and they will want the same thing. If I'm miserable, they're not going to want to be a wife and a mom someday. My mom was miserable. She had a bunch of kids and it made her miserable. I don't want to exhibit that to my children. I want them to want what I have. And influence is the best teacher. Example is the best teacher. Remember that they catch more is caught than is taught. So remember that, okay? Just remember that. They need more love and instruction than ever. And this is really when it gets amped up, when they get to about age 10 on up. You're going to have to show them that love, and you're going to have to constantly instruct. It's not, my life as a mom never ends when it comes to instructing my kids. In fact, they get kind of annoyed at me, even my adult kids, because I turn everything into life lessons with mom, but I can't help it. It's just, that's what moms do. And we want to always try to offer that instruction because I'm not going to have that forever. We have them for a very, very short time. In the grand scheme of things, it may feel long, but it's really not. So we have a very short time to impart everything. And I've told my oldest kids this. I'm like, sometimes as a mom, I feel helpless because how can I possibly tell you everything that you need to know for life? How can I possibly get you ready for life? I can't possibly tell you everything you need to know, but that's just where you do your best and then you leave them in God's hands and they have to decide to carry that on if they want. So let's talk about teens. So teens, yeah, you are in the honeymoon stage. Yeah. Aw, that's sweet, Amanda. Amanda said Caleb was saved at almost 5 years old. On the way home from church, he started asking questions and Josh pulled the van over right before we got on the highway and he was saved. And that's sweet that he just took the time to just pull over and deal with it. And that's another thing with having kids. You are constantly going to have to what is the term for it? You're going to have to restructure your day when different things come up. Maybe this teenager needs you to talk to them for an hour or two because they're really going through something. They're really struggling with something. You're going to need to put everything else on the back burner and you're going to need to deal with that. Sometimes you're going to be up till midnight talking with your kids. After 11 p.m. is really one of the only times I'm able to talk to my college age kid. And so that's when I do it. So my love of sleep is taking a back burner spot right now in this phase of my life. I don't get much sleep right now, but that's okay because I'm caring for kids from 6:37 in the morning until almost midnight. So that's okay. That's the stage I'm in right now. And I'm not always going to have that. So I can get rid of sleep sometimes. Yes, I love that, April. She said, my mother-in-law always says to teach biblical principles and they will be prepared for everything life throws at them. And I'm finding that out more and more, even with my adult kids. Even if I didn't go over a specific example that comes up, they remember the teaching, they remember the training of their mom, specifically, obviously the dad too. But as the mom, especially homeschooling moms, we spend almost every waking moment in the home with our child. So we're going to have a bigger influence on their life than even sometimes dad does. So, and then Chanela says, I make almost everything a teaching moment. My older ones are probably starting to find it annoying, but I tell them I'm not going to be here forever. You're right. And you're not going to be with them in every situation that life throws at them too. So hopefully we can teach them in a way that when they're put in that situation, they'll kind of think back to what would my mom tell me to do or whatever. So, okay, but teenagers, they need tons of help. Not help, like they need lots of life lessons, lots of chit chat, lots and lots of chit chat. I would say sassiness is definitely at its peaks, so try not to go too crazy with that. Like I've said before, I'm not the type that tries to squelch my kids' will into oblivion. And my way is the highway. And because I said, and I don't ever, ever, ever answer me back. Now, sometimes I will tell them, you need to be quiet right now and do not say another word about it, because I've already explained, maybe I have already explained why you're doing this or why you're not doing this. I've explained it sufficiently and they just want to argue. You can tell the difference. And that's when you can say not another word, or there will be consequences. So I do put my foot down sometimes, but I also don't mind. When questions come up explaining why we do things, I would rather have them know why we do things, because some point in life, they're going to have to decide if they want to do it. So if I just say, because I said so, that's not a good enough answer to establish life's beliefs or beliefs and, core beliefs, why we do things the way we do it. That's not enough for a teenager. So you definitely need to have reasons why you do things. Teenagers definitely start to push boundaries. They're growing up, they're getting older, they're getting closer to adulthood. And they are starting to push boundaries. And then this question comes up a lot, to control your teenager or not to control. So the way that we do it in our home is we do allow our teenagers liberty. We allow them freedom. We allow them liberty. And because they have not given us a reason not to allow it. So until they give us a reason to not allow certain freedoms and things, then we're going to continue allowing that when they've shown themselves trustworthy. If something pops up where they do, they do go against a rule in our house or something that they know that they're not supposed to do, we deal with that, and we might take away some privileges for a time until they regain our trust again. But overall, we've not really dealt with a lot of trying to break the rules, or they kind of know what's expected of them and they just kind of do it. And for our boys especially, we've not really, my oldest son has ran races for a long time. They'll drive to Chicago and do stuff there. They have a good group of friends that they do things with, so I'm not really worried about it. And they've never given us a reason not to trust them. And honestly, my oldest is almost 21. What am I going to do? And he is actually in college, a Bible college right now that has more rules than we ever gave him. So he's being micromanaged now more than he ever has been, but he's going along with it for the most part because he knew what he was signing up for. And then our second is almost 20 and our third is 18. So at this point, they've got to choose whether or not they're going to submit themselves and follow our rules, especially while still living at home. And they've all chosen to do that. So we don't have a problem there yet. Will that ever come up where we do? Well, if it does, then we'll deal with it then, but we haven't had to deal with it yet. So definitely talk to your kids in the car, talk to your kids in the evening. Don't be buried in your social media or buried in your phone all the time. Talking is so important at this age because life lessons all the time, because they're going to need it. So definitely. What privileges do you allow your teen girls? Go out alone with or two friends, or not so much? The friends that my one that drives, Abigail, the friends that she has, I know and I trust. So yes, I do allow her to go over to their homes when they're in town. One of her closest friends pretty much lives an hour and a half away, so they don't get together very often. But yes, I have let her drive over there. I've let her go out to coffee with them. I know both of the moms of her really close friends, and I'm not worried about it. So yeah, but she has not done anything to, betray my trust as of yet. So she's pretty open. They're pretty open with me about what they want to do, who they want to do it with, and I'm pretty flexible with a lot of the stuff that they do. So, but yeah, I know her friends. And then if she has friends here at the church, obviously I'm going to let her do stuff with them because I know and trust them too. So yeah, now if you had a daughter, a teenage girl that maybe was hanging out with friends that weren't good news, I would definitely encourage you to try to get her to find better friends. Friends can be tricky with teenage girls. I haven't really ran into my kids having bad influences in their life. So most of the influences that they've been around have been good for the most part. And if they weren't good influences, they distanced themselves on their own, which encouraged me as a mom. They did kind of just break off fellowship with them. I say break off fellowship, that's like a Baptist term, but they kind of just started distancing themselves from them, from those bad influences. So that encouraged me as a mom. So, and then influence over power. Remember that your kids are growing up and you want them to start becoming more independent because they are becoming adults and they're going to have to face this big old world on their own and stand on their own 2 feet and make their own decisions very, very soon. So from 16 on up, it's very, very soon. So influence over power. I try not to be too controlling with my older teens, and with my adults, I try not to be controlling at all. It's influence. Now we have certain ground rules in our home that they know that would never fly, but they just know by that age. So I've not had them really push it. To physically discipline teenagers or not. I don't care if this is popular or not, but this is the way we've done it in our home. And we have never gone to anyone else for advice when it came to raising our own kids. But no, we do not physically discipline our teenagers. First of all, our boys, if they didn't want to submit, which I think they would, even if it came down to it, but it's just by the time your kids get to be teenagers, the need for physical discipline should be gone. They should be wise enough, and you should have trained them well enough between the ages of like 3 to 5, that they are to submit to your will and they are to obey you. So if you are still having to physically discipline them as a teenager, I really feel you missed the boat somewhere. Maybe the training didn't happen well enough. And I've seen it in a lot of growing up, in the homes where they did have the physical discipline as a teenager. I've only seen it cause resentment and bitterness and hatred towards their parents. And so that's why I think the Bible talks about, chastening your child when they're young. And because it does need to happen. The physical discipline needs to happen when they're younger, and not so much as they get older, because I firmly believe it will cause resentment and bitterness and hatred towards your authority when it comes to that. So we don't physically discipline our teenagers. No, we don't. And I don't care who thinks what about that. That's the way we've done it. And so far, I like our product. So we're going to keep doing it that way. Can we tweak that as we get older? Well, I'm not going to say that there will never be a time. I don't know. I'm not one to throw out nevers. That's one thing I've learned with parenting. Never say never. I'm not one to throw out nevers, but overall, we consistently do not do that as teenagers. So most of the physical corrections should come when they're younger. Please don't talk a big game when it comes to physical discipline when you only have kids 8 and under. Just please don't. Don't throw out, I will always do this. As long as my kid is in my house, they will always get physically disciplined. You're going to eat those words one day. So I would be really careful saying, I will always do this, or we will always do that when you have kids 10 and under, 8 and under, 5 and under. You're at a very easy stage right now where it's easy to say that. But wait until they get older and you see that sometimes your relationship is more important than you just being right, you know, then your relationship is more important than you just exerting physical force over your teenage son who's a head taller than you. So be really careful when throwing that stuff out. Thank you, Chanello. I agree. By 13, you should have done all the physical disciplining. Any physical disciplining after, in my opinion, that is futile and even detrimental. I agree, and I've seen that. I'm like I'm a second generation Christian, so I grew up in a Christian home. I was around a lot of other homeschooling families, and I saw the families that used the physical discipline into the teen years, and their kids, when they turned 18, they walked away from it all. There was so much just correction, not balanced with loving anything. It was just all, you do this or else, because I said or else, or the hammer's coming down. It was all just physical discipline without the relationship, and they wanted no part of it when they got older, and they just walked away from it all. And I don't want that for my kids. I want my kids to continue on in this. So I'm going to do things. And the Bible says, yes, to physically discipline your children, but it also talks about doing it when they're young. So when there's hope for them. And so, when you've got an adult living in your house, you kind of, if you just start implementing physical discipline when you've got an adult and you didn't when they were young, I think you missed the boat on that one. So Amanda said, I learned my lesson saying nevers. I was humbled big time and continued to be as my children grow. Before I had them, I thought I knew it all. Boy, was I wrong. Yes. That was my biggest piece of advice. Never say never, or never say we're always going to do this until you've raised kids into adulthood. And then if you have some rule, some rule that you want to incorporate and it's worked for all 10 of your children, and they're all in church and love the Lord and serving God and marry good spouses, and then go ahead, say it. I will listen to you. I will listen. I'll say, that's really good advice. But until then, I would be careful saying nevers and always. And this comes to another point. Don't model your home after someone else's. Don't model your home after mine. If you firmly believe that it's okay to physically discipline your kid when they're a teen, by all means, go for it. It's your kid. It's your home. I'm just throwing out things that I've seen worked and things that I've seen that haven't worked. And maybe I'm royally wrong in this area. I don't know. But I'm telling you what's worked with my kids. It might not work with your kids. So don't model your home after mine. Don't model your home after Mr. Big Hacho Hotshot Preacher Man. Model your home, dig in the Bible yourself, follow the leading of the Holy Spirit, trust your gut. I've seen so many people that go against their instinct just because of what someone else said, and they do harm to their children. They do harm to their children physically. They do harm to their relationships with their children. So you want to be really careful when it comes to that. Your kids will embarrass you. They're going to keep you humble. That's, I think, no, I'm 100% sure the most humbling thing in my life has been raising kids. 100% sure. And they're going to embarrass you. And that's what I learned to say, my kid would never do that. Oh, they probably will now. God heard you say that. God's going to have your child's going to do that just so God can keep you humble. But they're going to embarrass you. Just forgive and move them on. Don't be holding every little infraction over their head. We mess up, and it would be really discouraging to us as parents if our kid was constantly holding it over our head. Thankfully, kids are very forgiving. I feel like kids are more forgiving than parents sometimes. And your child loves you unconditionally, and they'll forgive you when you mess up. So try to do the same for them. Definitely forgive them, move on. Don't bring it up. Don't hang it over their head. Don't hold it over their head. Just love them, forgive them, move on. They need their parents to be proud of them. Even at 42, I want my parents to be proud of me. I've thought the last 20 some years since my dad died, I hope he's in the cloud of witnesses and he can see my life, and I hope I make him proud. I hope his grandkids that I've had for him make him proud. I still want my parents to be proud of me. I think it's in us to always make our parents proud of us, and your kids need that too. So tell them that you're proud of them. Tell them what you like about them. Tell them that you appreciate their strong points. Be careful correcting them in public, especially as teens. They are highly sensitive to what others think of them at this stage. This is going to be the most insecure time of their life. They're still under mom and dad's authority. But they're getting ready. They're growing up. They're getting ready to test their independence and branch out. And they're very insecure. They don't know yet what it's like to be an adult. They don't know truly their personality. Even when I got married at 20, I feel like my personality has changed even a lot since then, since getting married and having kids. And once you get into your 30s and 40s, you kind of become more confident in who you are. You know your belief system. You know why you believe what you believe. You're confident in it. You're secure in it. Well, as an older teenager, young adult, you're not really yet. So give them some grace. Yes, the story about the window never being broken. That's when I started stopping. That's when I started to, I told myself, I'm never going to say never again, because a window was broken in church and we were trying to figure out who did it. If you haven't heard this, if you have, I'm sorry. We were trying to figure out who did it. And one of the moms said, I think Tommy did it. He was like 5 or 6, 7 with a bow in it, his play bow and arrow. And I said, oh no, my son would never do that. Guess whose son did it? My son, with a bow and arrow. So we had him pay for it. It was $100 window to fix. He stood there, pulled back his bow and arrow. It was one of the training ones, but enough to break a window. Shot right into the window, broke it. One of the most humbling things, because I had opened my big mouth. If I would have just kept my mouth shut, but oh, your son will never, huh? Well, guess what? Your son did. And because of that, I have always remembered that. I have never forgot that. And so that's when I stopped saying my kids would never. My kids would never. Now, I will say sometimes it doesn't sound like their personality, and then I'll dig into it. And usually there is 2 sides to the story when it comes to a tiff between kids, or when it comes to this kid did that or that kid did that. There's usually 2 sides, and there's usually 2 antagonists in the story. So yes, you do sometimes have to dig, but I have said, no, that doesn't sound like their personality. And then when I dig into it, it makes sense. But I will not say again, my kid will never do that, because chances are they probably will now. Don't belittle or mock them, especially in front of people. They're very, very, very sensitive to scrutiny at this point. And then unconditional love from mom and dad. They need to know, first of all, they need to know that your relationship with dad is very strong at this point. Teenagers really crave security, and they crave praise, and they crave love. And if you have all those 3 things, you can sometimes balance that with the harsh correction sometimes. And if you have the love part down, they're going to be more apt to responding well to the harsh criticism and trying to straighten up and trying to clean up their act, than if it's just constant criticism, physical discipline, but never any of the praise or the love. Yeah, they definitely need that. So then last but not least, because we are going over yet again, adult children. So when they reach 18 and above, your fruit does start to show. Did your methods work? If not, you still have younger kids. So here are a couple things to do. Let's say, and we all have raised, you've raised children, and sometimes you're like, ooh, that's probably something I need to work on. Maybe I was a little too impatient with my younger ones, and now we're seeing exhibited in their life. I had a short temper, and we're seeing it exhibited in their life. So just acknowledge your mistakes and do better. That's all we can do, right? Tell your kids where you're going to work to do better. I've messed up in this area. I'm going to really work on it. And your kids will probably hold you accountable when it comes to it. And then just don't ever stop praying, even if you messed up, because at the end of the day, your kids have to decide for themselves. Do I want this life? Do I want to still follow the Lord? Do I want to serve him? Do I want to love him? You cannot just take a shot and just shoot love for the Lord into them. They have to decide to do that at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, they will have to decide that. But I think sometimes as parents too, we don't accept responsibility where responsibility begins. We don't accept responsibility for some of the ways that we messed up, for our short temper, for, maybe not being hard enough in this area, maybe being too loose in this area, maybe being too harsh in this area. We're not perfect. We're going to mess up. And I think sometimes, well, they will decide, they have to decide on their own. Yes, that's true. But we can still accept blame where there is blame and work on it. Yes, Janello, the firstborn is usually the experimental child. That is true. And I have told Tommy very often that he was our guinea pig. And even as he got old enough to date and different things, I kept telling him, I said, we're figuring this out as we go, because this world of having adult is so much different than I ever thought it would be. It's so different because they might choose a different path than I have laid out in my head, or that you had laid out in your head. And that's okay. We all have dreams and plans for our children when we get those 2 positive lines on the pregnancy test. And we all have different scenarios we think are going to work out, and they're going to do this and they're going to do this. And, they're going to start dating at 18 and meet a sweet girl, and they're going to get married by the time they're 19. They're going to have their first kid by they're 20. It doesn't always work that way. And I've noticed that, as long I've come to the acceptance, as long as my kids are on a good path and they love the Lord and they want to serve him, I'm happy. I'm a happy mama. My goal for my adult kids is that they serve God. They remain pure until marriage, in body and in heart. I want them to be pure in their heart and their mind as well. Serve God, love God, and that they raise my grandkids in church after finding a good spouse. And how they get there might be different than what I had envisioned. It might be a different way than I think they should do it, but they're adults, and I just need to trust that I did my best raising them and leave them in God's hands. And that's the point I have come to with my adult kids. So what kind of control do you really have over your adult kids? Well, for me, I try to guide them, but I leave it up to them. I want them to learn to make their own decisions. I want them to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. So I definitely pray for them. I try to tell them I'm proud of them in the areas that I really see them stepping up and being an influence in other people's lives, being a good influence. And the cool thing about having adult children is that you now have friends and adult conversation. And I think that's really how I survived the last 2 weeks while my husband was gone. When I had little kids, I don't know if I could have, because I would have had to go stay at someone's house where there was adult conversation, because as an adult, you get tapped out a lot from just little kid jibber jabber jibber jibber. It's not the same as having adult kids. Now that I have adult kids, intelligent conversation, they're fun to be with. I like them as people. I would choose them as my friends, in real life. So it gets really fun when they get to that age. Just let them be them. As a mom, I know moms, and sometimes we're like, oh, really, guys? Because, they're doing things different than we would, or we wouldn't have done it that way, or whatever, but just let them be them. Bathe them in prayer. I think for adult kids, I feel like I pray more now that, one of them is kind of out on his own. I pray now more than I ever have, because, and I've gotten to the point where I can't worry all the time about him. I can't. I would drive myself crazy. So instead, every time I think about him, I just pray. And as our kids get to be adults, that's really all we can do. We can pray, we can bathe them in prayer, we can lift them up to God, we can be an influence. If they ask, we can love them unconditionally, we can be proud of them, and be involved. I don't think I've missed one day of messaging my son since he went to college. I talk to him all the time. So, but bathe them in prayer. Yeah. Yes, Sarah, you probably would die without Aaron for 2 weeks. You're at that point of your life where you would die. No, I was able to survive, but I know it's because I have older kids. I could not have done this when I had little kids. He could not have been gone for 2 weeks. It would have been terrible. It was already bad enough, but it would have been terrible. So, and then let them make mistakes and don't hold it over their head. Like I said, they're going to do stupid things. Think back. A lot of the ones that listen to my show weren't even saved at their adult kids' age. So think back to when you were the age that your kids are now. Think of all the stupid things you did. And by the grace of God, something worse didn't happen, right? So just remember that. Remember what it's like to be young. And remember, they don't have the wisdom that you have. They don't have the foresight that you have. They don't have life experience like you have. So they're going to be thinking differently. So let them make mistakes and don't hold it over their head. They'll learn. The school of hard knocks, they're going to learn from stuff that they do. And then just remember with your adult kids, it's influence over power, 100%. You can thump your chest and say, as long as my kid lives in my house, he's whatever. And you can have rules for your own house. You can do it that way. But chances are your kid's probably just going to move out when they're 18 if you're thumping your chest and roaring about all the power that you have over your kid because they still live in their own, in your home. So by the time they're 18, you definitely want your child to be independent, but knowing that if he had to move out on his own, he'd still go to church. He would still choose to remain pure, and he would still choose to do things the right way. And he would still be in his Bible, and he would still be loving the Lord and wanting a relationship with his family and all that good stuff. So that's the goal of mine. I don't know what your goal is for your family. Is your goal for your adult kids to be money makers and career people, work their way up the career ladder? Or is your goal just for them to be good, humble, honest, hardworking people who, love the Lord and love their future spouse that they get? So that's mine. So these are just different things, different ways we've tried to, and different ways that we've raised our own kids. I would say that us being raised, I was from a first generation Christian home, where neither my mom nor my dad were raised in Christian homes, and they really didn't know where to start when it came to raising good Christian kids. So my mom especially probably erred more on the side of being too controlling, because she was so worried she was going to mess up in some areas. And so my husband and I are probably not quite as controlling as how we were raised. But our goal has always been that we want to raise children who choose this life for themselves. We don't want to force it on them. We want them to choose it, because if we died tomorrow, we would still want them to continue on in this. If our influence was suddenly gone, we would want them to continue on in this life. And we've also realized that we have to provide a happy home for our kids so that they'll want the same thing, so that our boys won't want to become MGTOW when they grow up because they hate women so much or something, or they saw a miserable marriage, or their mom was just criticizing them all the time, so they want nothing to do with women. We want to provide a happy environment and a happy home and a happy church life, so that someday our kids will choose that for themselves. So that's what we do. So Janella said, my husband and I enjoy watching the interaction you and your husband have with your adult and teenage kids. Some might think that our kids have a little bit too much freedom when it comes to expressing themselves, but that's just the way we do it. In our home, we joke with each other. We laugh with each other. I'm not horrified when my kids actually have an opinion, and it's not my opinion. We let them be them, or we try to. So like I said, there's a time and place for everything. And there's a time where we have to say, knock it off or stop or whatever. And they usually listen, they straighten right up. But there's also room for letting them just be themselves too. So, and I think anyone that knows us or is close to our family they know that about us, and they see that. So, yeah, I think they all see that. But anyways, I think that is about it for today. If you guys have any suggestions, definitely leave them in the chat about different topics. This just, a lot of times things just pop in my head because it's what I'm talking about with my friends or talking about with other moms. And this was just something we were talking about today, just how there's so many different stages of parenting, and also too how our parenting has changed through the years, because you don't truly know. You can run your mouth all you want before you have kids, and you can run your mouth all you want about teenagers before you have teenagers, and you can run your mouth all you want about having adult kids before you have adult kids, but you're not going to know until you actually do it, until you actually raise it, until you've been through that season in your life. So anyways, be careful listening to the completely over the top ones who have all these harsh rules and regulations and guidelines and things when they haven't even, raised a full generation. So that's what I'll say about that. But, oh, thanks, Amanda. I think so. We all have our faults. They all have their faults, but so do I. It's no one has perfect kids, but no one's the perfect parent. So what do we expect? Don't expect more from your kids than you yourself are capable of doing. And I'm glad that I don't have someone in my life like standing over me, ready to come down with the hammer every time I mess up. And I don't want to be like that with my kids, even from the time they're 5, 6, 7. I've seen some little 5, 6, 7-year-olds that are perfectly well behaved, so perfectly well behaved. And it makes me a little sad, because I do think they are in serious fear of any infraction that they commit, the hammer coming down on every little infraction that they do. And I'm sure glad God's not like that with me. I'm sure glad that God is long-suffering and patient, and he gives me grace every single day, even when I mess up. I'm still here and I'm still breathing. That's how I know God has given me grace. So let's try to parent our children the same way. So I hope you all ladies have a great week. It is 2 weeks until Christmas. I have zilch done. So pray for me in the next couple weeks that I can actually get Christmas done. So I hope you all get done what you need to this week, and have a great week, and we will see you next week.